Hello and welcome. You're watching India Global. I am Vedant Agarwal. Well, coming up on the show this evening, India's Bangladesh tightrope walk. Well, this is Bangladesh has now, in a sense, reached out to China. The head of the interim government, Muhammad Yunus, has in fact called on China to, in a sense, relocate solar factories, solar industries back to Bangladesh. This made Bangladesh's green transition something that has been the key focus of Bangladesh, key focus of Muhammad Yunus ever since he was sworn in as the head of the interim government. But what does this really mean for India? Well, ties between Bangladesh and India have been on the rise. In fact, given the fact that we saw, particularly in the past 10 years, both the countries growing exceedingly close under the Awami League government, under Sheikh Hasina, and now Bangladesh's China outreach. How should India read this? Does India need to be more cautious given the fact that Muhammad Yunus has directly now reached out to China? And what really are the challenges ahead? Let's take a look at that big questions graphic now as we decode all aspects of the challenges of India's diplomatic policy vis-a-vis Bangladesh. Of course, one of the key challenges is the minorities issue, given the fact that all these reports have been doing the rounds of attacks on minorities in Bangladesh, though of course Muhammad Yunus has now made it clear that there is no discrimination on religious grounds, assuring India in a sense that the minorities in Bangladesh, Hindus essentially, are safe in the country. Also, the larger geopolitical aspect of India's position in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, rising China, and China of course growing closer to various former allies of India and various countries in the neighborhood. How should India read this? We decode all of that on the show this evening. And joining me, Ayanjeet Sen, who is an expert on Bangladesh affairs. I'll also be joined by Muqtadir Rashid, a senior journalist from Bangladesh. In fact, Rashid Saab is also with us. Thanks both very much for joining us on India Global this evening. Mr. Sen, going across to you first, how do you look at Bangladesh's China outreach? Should India be circumspect? Should India be wary as Bangladesh reaches out to China?
Thank you. Well, I would like to say here that China and Bangladesh have been trading partners for now over a decade. And what China has said that it wants to further develop, quote unquote, all-round strategic partnership. And this line has been used by the Chinese ambassador to Bangladesh, Yao Wen. And this clearly, in a way, the same utterance China has done with France, UK, Spain, and Germany. And in a way, it seems that what China is doing right now is closing up on the caretaker government in Bangladesh. And the solar panel story that came out, of course, that's something which is worth noting. And also the part that the Belt and Road initiatives that were taken up, Bangladesh is a strategic importance to China from that perspective, to do with infrastructure and the trade networks. So it's trying to kind of slowly but surely extend its influence in South Asia. And the situation in Bangladesh is presented now China with this kind of a situation which they are using to its advantage.
Okay, Muqtadir Rashid, senior journalist of Bangladesh, is also with us. Rashid Saab, from Bangladesh's point of view, both India and China, perhaps as many neutral observers would point out, are important. But what we have seen in the past 10 years, particularly the growing closeness between India and Bangladesh, that has benefited Bangladesh a great deal economically as well. So it's not a relationship that Bangladesh perhaps can afford to, in a sense, forego or dilute perhaps as well as it reaches out to other allies.
Thank you for having me, but I think there's some issue we are always missing out. So first, I think that what the relationship between Bangladesh and India, the basic relationship is all about the democracy, and the essence we want to get from the Indian and Bangladesh relation, that is the democracy. So as long as the democracy and democratic values are there, the relation will be, nobody can destroy the relation, whoever in the power. So this value should be, always on the top of our discussion. And the relation, what we have with the China, the people of China, many Bangladeshis are traveling to China for their higher education, for their business. but yet we have so many barriers, the language barrier, we have the cultural barrier. There are so many barriers. So China very much aware of that, the things, very, very much aware of things. Given that context, we should respect the values of Bangladeshi people. So as long as India is respecting the values of Bangladeshi people, like the democratic values, the human rights values, the values towards the people's aspiration, I don't think there will be no problem with at all. And the relation depends on the people to people. It's not on what the government is coming. So you see what's going on. The growing after the successive election, after 2013 election, after 2018 election, after the 2024 election, everything. A majority Bangladeshi people went against India. Why? You have to keep in mind. It's not the trading partner. Forget about the trade. What we have with the China. So China is producing the cheapest item, and every market in the electronics market or the market related to the cheapest item, you will find the Chinese products. There is no doubt about it. But when we go for inequality, we maybe go for Western product or somewhere else. But China, depending on that, it's I think it's a wrong consideration from the Indian side. India should see they have to change their optics while they're talking to the people of Bangladesh. People of Bangladesh very much, how many people every year traveling to India? You just estimate.
Yeah, so that's an important point you're making there, Rashid Saab, that there is a people-to-people connect perhaps. There's a people-to-people connect, and there are long-standing historical ties that India and Bangladesh have had. But Ayanjeet Sen, come in on this, because something that is of great concern to India is the situation of minorities in Bangladesh. There have been reports of attacks on minorities, reports of vandalism, many of them unsubstantiated reports, surely. But how should India approach this entire crisis of minorities in Bangladesh? Though, of course, the Prime Minister has made it clear here in India as well, and so has Muhammad Yunus, saying that there is no discrimination on religious grounds. But it is a situation that is of deep concern for India.
Well, yes, because our Prime Minister Narendra Modi already said that. But at the same time, though Professor Yunus from the caretaker government head of Bangladesh has said that he stands by the minorities, but there have been reports, especially not from the cities or the bigger towns of Bangladesh, but from village areas which have come up, and their torture on the Hindus, vandalism, and several other charges have come out, and they've come out in several videos across the social media spectrum. And that clearly shows that incidents have happened. But the only thing is that how much is the Bangladesh government going to take care of this? Because saying is one thing, of course, but action needs to be taken as well. And so that these kind of incidents don't recur, because the Hindus in Bangladesh are definitely they're not feeling at home from that perspective, if I may say, because that's something because of which they have been trying to come to India, and which we have seen that in the past when the thing started off in the earlier part of the month. But one thing is certain, that the Indian government and the Bangladesh government both have said that the minorities issue will be looked after. But at the same time, I believe one needs to look beyond the curtain, because there are things happening beyond the curtain in terms of the smaller towns and cities where still incidents are taking place, and especially where several Hindu government officers had to resign, and they have resigned, and they have said that they're resigning on their own. But there have been reports which have also said that they have been made or asked to resign forcibly.
Okay.
And that's something which is definitely taking place, and it needs to be taken care of by both the governments.
Rashid Saab, would you like to comment on this? Because another aspect to this is that such kind of communal violence, if I can call it that, is not good for the stability of Bangladesh as well. I mean, it has wide-ranging ramifications for the country's economic growth and just overarchingly, the stability of Bangladesh.
In Bangladesh, you have to keep in mind that we didn't have government for 2 days and the police at least for a week. So we have to restore a lot of things, like from the security aspects, from the good governance. It's not possible right at this point. But the people here, how they react to that attack, did they mobilize those attacks on minority? No, never. Bangladeshi people, I visited lots of temple here. Yes, there are few incidents. Of course, there are a few incidents. There is miscreant. It didn't happen just now when Dr. Yunus took power. It happened. You will find hundreds of thousands similar attacks on minority during last 15 years of Sheikh Hasina. Similar in when BNP was in power. It's not about that. Many miscreants want to take that advantage and try to grab their pricey land. There many Hindus lives in a very pricey land, and so they try to just kick them out from the land, and then they try to. And many government officials in past, we said, which are related to the government.
So are you of the opinion that Muhammad Yunus will be able to, in a sense, tackle this situation? And are you confident that Muhammad Yunus will be able to assure the minorities?
I believe. I spoke to Hindu leaders. They said they found Dr. Yunus as a secular leader. They found that he is very much amicable to this Hindu community. Today, in fact, that was the Janmashtami today, and he met most of the top Hindu leaders at his official residence, and he spoke to them. And you have to keep in mind that most of the people here very much sympathetic to any kind of people who are expressing their views. So we don't want to isolate any community when we in the process of nation building. All the democratic institution has been destroyed over 15 years. All the security forces are being collapsed. Police needs more than 1 week to restore the normalcy, and the normalcy is yet to become. So we have to keep in mind. But whether it is state sponsored or not, whether it is the people of the so-called majority that we are sponsoring, we are appreciating or not, are we laughing at it or not?
So you're of the opinion that these are fringe elements. These are fringe elements largely, and there's no real state-sponsored violence against minorities. That's an important point and distinction that you make there. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for being with us on India Global this evening. This is a story we'll continue to track very, very closely on India Global. But for now, a short break. Check 1 2 3 1 2 3 check 1 2 3 check. Welcome back. You're with India Global, and now our big focus on the show this evening. Well, India-Singapore ties. There is certainly, a host of opportunities that are waiting to be explored as far as these two key allies are concerned. Well, this on the backdrop of a key ministerial roundtable that took place just a short while back. In fact, the Indian delegation, as you can see in those pictures, comprised our Finance Minister, also External Affairs Minister S. Shankar, the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, our IT Minister, Railway Minister Mr. Vaishnaw as well. So this was a key meeting, and of course it was the External Affairs Minister of Singapore that was leading the delegation from the country. And this, in a sense, is a reminder of the multitude of opportunities that the two close allies can explore, including, of course, in the areas of defense, also digital infrastructure, given the fact that this has been one of the key focus areas of the Modi government as well. And in the larger geopolitical context, can India and Singapore counter Chinese aggression and also the growing Chinese footprint as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned? What does the India-Singapore bilateral relationship really mean for Southeast Asia? Well, joining me for more on this, I'm being joined by Dawn McLean-Gill, who's a lecturer at the Southeast Asia and a Southeast Asia expert, Department of International Studies. Also with me on the show this evening, Harsh V. Pant, Head of Strategic Affairs, ORF. Thanks, gentlemen, for being with us. Mr. Gill, going across to you first. How do you see the growing closeness between India and Singapore? Of course, we've been historical allies. We've had a long-standing relationship behind us. But in today's day and age, particularly with the growing Chinese aggression, with the growing Chinese footprint, how do you see India and Singapore, cooperating on matters of, say, defense and, of course, a larger geopolitical strategy?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be in this program alongside Professor Harsh V. Pantji. So it's a great pleasure. Now, we have to understand that among the Southeast Asian countries that India has had historical engagements with, Singapore holds a very special place in New Delhi's foreign policy outlook. From the 1960s, the mid-1960s to the 1970s, it was in fact Singapore that was quite encouraging of India to play a larger security and development role in Southeast Asia, despite New Delhi's reservations towards the region during the mid-Cold War period, right? So when New Delhi adopted its Look East policy under former Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, Singapore looked at this with great enthusiasm and eventually catalyzed and served as a bridge for India to link with major ASEAN-led institutions such as the ARF, EAS, and even becoming a full dialogue partner of Singapore. In the line of security, we have worked closely in maritime security cooperation as well. And there is, in fact, a significant precursor to that spanning in the late 1990s. Now, today, as India is more proactive in translating its growth in material capabilities to a more robust foreign policy in Southeast Asia, and as Southeast Asian countries are increasingly looking for alternative partners amidst the US-China power competition, I feel that India and Singapore could definitely converge in this light, and we have also seen the success in a broader sense of Act East policy towards other countries in Southeast Asia.
Professor Pant, come in on this, because many would argue that perhaps ASEAN is no longer relevant, given the fact that we've moved to newer international organizations. Do you still see as an important and decisive international body, particularly as far as matters of Southeast Asia are concerned?
Look, ASEAN certainly has some relevance, and I think ASEAN has relevance for the regional states. But I think what is happening is that there is, like many other organizations in the world, we are seeing a fragmentation of ASEAN. And I think that is the reality that we have to contend with, and I think India will have to fashion a response to that. And as Dawn was pointing out, for a very long time, India has had very strong bilateral ties with key stakeholders in Southeast Asia, and Singapore was one of the first countries to really be an anchor for India in that part of the world. So certainly, I think taking that relationship forward while keeping ASEAN's centrality as at the heart of India's Indo-Pacific response, India has to ensure now that some of these bilateral partnerships become more robust, because only when you have robust bilateral partnerships can you inject a momentum in your Southeast Asia and East Asia policy. Without that, relying solely on ASEAN certainly is no longer going to work, when ASEAN has been unable to find a solution to some of the problems that are infested in the region at the moment, particularly South China Sea, and particularly the growing role of China in the region and how that is impacting different countries in Southeast Asia differently. So India will have to also negotiate some of these trends and figure out a response, while keeping, once again, of course, ASEAN as an important part of its outreach, but bilateral partnerships, particularly with traditional partners like Singapore and newer partners like Philippines. I think this is something that India will have to reinvigorate as India looks forward to a more robust posture in Southeast Asia.
Mr. Gill, come in on this point, because some of the emerging areas that the two allies are looking at, of course, defense is key among them. How do you see India and Singapore's defense strategy taking shape, given the fact that it has been a volatile 2 or 3 years, whether it is in terms of what we've seen in terms of maritime safety, that needs to be one area that India needs to secure completely, particularly as far as Southeast Asia is concerned. So how do you see India and Singapore's defense strategy? Because there are certainly very many common values at the center of this relationship.
Right, and India and Singapore converge on a lot of aspects, especially when it comes to maritime security. When we look into the map, Singapore is a key maritime Southeast Asian nation, which straddles significant sea lines of communication and is currently facing the brunt of excessive militarization of the strategic South China Sea. Now, of course, Singapore also has significant stakes in the Indian Ocean region. And in fact, one of the key and initial levels of partnership between Singapore and India in terms of maritime security also centered on the Indian Ocean. Now, with the Indo-Pacific construct rising, we are now seeing the convergence of the Indian and Pacific Ocean as one strategic unit, and where concerns and interests and security dynamics have become largely intertwined. So in this regard, I feel that there is a recognition in Singapore and in Delhi regarding the need to facilitate and institutionalize defense partnerships, in this light amidst emerging threats. And it doesn't stop with Singapore. And in fact, when we look into Southeast Asia as a whole, we see a lot of important developments when it comes to India, Indonesia, India, Vietnam, and even here, India and the Philippines, right? Even Cambodia from the Indochina region has also showed its interest in working with India. So I believe, as Professor Panta said, the need to institutionalize these partnerships. And for India to work with Japan, for instance, would be crucial.
All right, that's an interesting point you're making. Professor Pant, I'd also like to focus a little bit on, towards the end of the debate, on digital public infrastructure. In fact, recently we saw all these reports of how Singapore is also looking to collaborate with India to develop something on the lines of the Aadhaar, for example. So that's extremely interesting. What are the possibilities as far as this collaboration is concerned, vis-a-vis digital public infrastructure?
I think very, very crucial, because if you look at the ISMR agenda, the ministerial agenda, you are looking at a lot of themes that are very critical in shaping the next stage of India-Singapore bilateral relationship. So whether it is digitization, healthcare, skilling and education, sustainable development, I think all these areas are going to be critical as India charts out a more ambitious engagement with Singapore and more importantly with other countries, like-minded countries in Southeast Asia. But with Singapore, there is a comfort level which is quite striking, and I think that's why it has been, in a partner for, as you point out, in the digital public infrastructure, the space where Singapore has been one of the countries that early on came on board and said that we want to partner with you. But I think the success of India-Singapore partnership in that regard can be an exemplar for other countries in Southeast Asia as well.
All right. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for being with us. I'm afraid I'm running out of time here. But this, of course, is something that can be a potentially game-changing relationship, particularly in Southeast Asia. Thanks very much for being with us. Another news now, well, Brazil's foreign minister visited India, and this amid a crucial bilateral meeting between the two countries. Brazil, of course, is one of the most important Latin American allies for India. Brazil also is set to host a G20 summit this year, which is why this meeting becomes even more important. And well, that's all the time that we have on India Global, but keep watching NDTV.